Hi, Marie-France. Thank you for joining us. She's going to talk about the data that she's been crunching, which is fascinating, I've got to say. I tried to wrap my head around it when we spoke last week. And she's going to be able to give us some observations about her other data sets, that's not just the ones that Avison Young uses, but a whole bunch of ones that she's familiar with. So we're really delighted to have you. Again, I encourage people to put into the chat any questions, and I'll bring them back and ask you, Marie-France, or if you can see them in the chat, by all means, but don't worry about that because I can feed them to you if I see them. So over to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you for having me. I'd like to just share my screen. I prepared some interesting stats on the vitality of the Canadian cities and the return to the downtown core. So it just I think that Jamie has a backup because I don't see where I can share the screen.
Hang on, we'll just see what we're going to do here. You and I can chat for a minute while they do miracles back.
Well, maybe I can talk about the.
Oh, there you go. There's your screen.
Okay, perfect.
You're all set.
Okay, very good. Yeah, thank you. So, can everyone see? Do I have to move this here? Right, correct. Very good. So what I'm going to present is a bit of a national market update on the Vitality Index, Avison Young's new technology and platform to measure the recovery of cities. We can go to the next slide. Basically, with the to the next page. Yes, thank you. So basically, what we have developed, it's a platform called Avant, which uses technology and to we have Avant Spaces, we have Avant Cities, and we also have the Vitality Index, which is what I will focus on today. The Vitality Index uses anonymized mobile phone data just to measure the visitor volume in the different, in selected location of the different cities, 23 cities across North America, including Canada's 6 major cities. We can go to the next slide, please. And what this Vitality Index allows us to track is the visitor volume. Now, the visitor volume, when we compare the 6 major cities in Canada to the 17 American cities, we see that Vancouver tops first in terms of recovery. The recovery is calculated based on the volume pre-pandemic of visitor volume compared to now. So what's interesting is that for market analysts, we often have a rear view mirror of what's happening like last quarter and last year, and historical data is not as useful as it used to be in the sense that things have changed so much and the changes have accelerated so much. So what this allows us to track is real-time improvements in in a different city's location, and improvement based on pre-pandemic levels of foot traffic. So Vancouver has recovered relatively well in compared to other cities, and we have also Edmonton and Calgary. And if we look at the next slide, we'll see that Toronto has recovered the least, only 10% of recovery of this volume coming back to Toronto. Then you have Montreal and also Ottawa. So it's interesting to maybe establish a correlation, which we haven't had a chance to dig deeper into, between the sanitary measures and the foot traffic. But let's also look at this in terms of a temporary situation, because this foot traffic or this visitor volume, as you can see, it's evolving weekly, and we can track it weekly. If you can go to the next slide, please. And we measure it for office, but we also measure it for different significant locations, airports, malls, different selected city locations. And this when I saw these stats, I was a bit surprised to see that Edmonton had like higher traffic in January 2022 compared to January 2020. And so when I asked the analysts to provide some answers, this is, well, one of the significant select site is the West Edmonton Mall. So now it makes sense because people cannot travel, and then there was a lot of those sites that I see someone saying that we'd love to see the data for London. We're currently covering the 6 major markets, but we have the technology to do more. If there's a need or a request for it, we can explore that. So we can go to the next slide, please. And so the vitality index is also so measuring the volume across the cities, in terms of by sector. And I'm not saying anything that no one already knows, is that office work from home measures probably the most popular sanitary measure out there. There's not a lot of incentive to lift it quickly compared to other sanitary measures. So the office sector is impacted more deeply than the other sectors. So we can go to the next one, please. I like this slide because it's the Canada Retail Vitality Index. And at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of analysts and were predicting that retail, we were all going to be shopping online forever and never go back to the store. And actually, it hasn't really happened. We've seen that as soon as it was possible and people felt safe to do so, we did go back to the mall, and we continue to buy online. It's not like buying online or buying in person, it's buying online and in person. And we also see that people are thriving to go back to their favorite restaurants and to congregate and to use the space to connect, because that has not changed. It's just different waves creating different upheavals, but at the core of who we are, we do need space to bring us together. So this index also allows to do it for a different specific times. So those 3 very important periods in retail, the Black Friday, the Boxing Day, and the Cyber Monday, were measured, and the online traffic or visitor volume was measured based on the last mile distribution centers. So the number of people busy around the last mile distribution centers. And we see, and it confirms the latest StatsCan data on online shopping, that it's kind of plateaued. We have bought online a lot, and it accelerated the adoption, but now it's kind of plateauing, and the retail sector is also looking at more experience retail with more entertainment and food, and we see it in big malls, and that's why I think that the downtown core continues to provide that. It's a question of bringing the office workers back to the downtown. We can go to the next slide, please. So in terms of the office, bringing the office workers downtown again, if we look at the type of office tenants as well, or occupiers, we see that in terms of engineering and consulting and other types of work like that, there was the plans to bring people back to the office were firming up for January. If it wasn't for that 5th wave, there were more companies who were confirming that, the policies, 1 day, 2 days, hybrid, and so on. So it was really set in motion. In terms of banking, insurance, and finance, that was a bit more well, there was not difficult, but I would say that a lot of people in the insurance companies, for example, are still working from home. There's some office work that continues to be done from home, but we can see that there's some kind of work from home fatigue as well from workers. We're talking about burnouts and things like that. So it's not all, it is working, but there also are some downsides to it. And we have yet to really fully understand the impact it's having on workers' productivity. So we can go to the next slide. So this just to compare, of course, we have the vacancy in real estate, that is the actual vacancy rate of space that is not leased, it's vacant, it's available for a lease, it's looking for a tenant. And we also have leased space that is currently unoccupied because people are working from home. And so what we're looking at now is the vacant space, like there's no there's no rent being paid for the office space that is it's vacant because it's available for lease. So we see in Canada we've reached like unprecedented levels. The pandemic has encouraged some tenants to put space back on the market, to get rid of excess space faster, maybe. A lot of decisions that were postponed. There was a wait and see attitude when the pandemic first at the first outbreak of the pandemic in March 2020. So people were waiting. No one thought it would last 2 years. Well, maybe some did, but they're very, if they have, they're very good at forecasting. So what we see is that quarter after quarter, the vacancy rate keeps increasing. But if we go to the next slide, you'll see that it's not as steep as in the US. In the US, for these gateway cities that are in the index, it's almost 16%, and we also see that they were impacted in 2008 and 9. So the availability rate compared to the total vacancy of 11% in 2021 is twice what it was in 2019. So the market was doing well until 2019, early 2020, and then it started to have less demand and more available space. We can go to the next slide. The US net absorption as a percentage of inventory was also negative in 2020, but slightly less, much more less negative in 2021. And if we compare that to Canada on the next slide, in Canada, the perspective is more interesting. We see that now there is a first positive absorption that was recorded since the start of the pandemic. So it would be exaggerated to say that office space, no one needs office space anymore. There is a lot of confidence by investors in office spaces, especially the best quality properties, the well-located properties, any property that is close to transit. Everyone who's had a taste maybe this fall of the return to the office, for being able to mingle, to have social interactions with colleagues, did enjoy the fact that they could go to the mothership, or it's also the brand of the company. So it would be way too quick to conclude that all this excess space will never be taken up. Anyway, at this point, of course, there's still increasing vacancy, but we'll see later. Before we go to the next slide, I just want to point that the 6 major markets, 38% of all Canadian inventory is in the Greater Toronto area. So when we look at national stats, like we just did, just keep in mind that 60% of the space is 38% of the inventory is in GTA. You add 20% Montreal, so that's what's driving the national stats. Which is why I like to break it down by city, because it gives us a better story. So Vancouver is a market that is recovering very well. Even the vacancies are dropping in Vancouver, and Ottawa is stabilizing. Montreal is still up. Toronto is also stabilizing. So we see it's harder in out west, but it's also stabilizing. And the high vacancy rates in Edmonton and Calgary were there before the pandemic. It's just that companies with the new hybrid models, they can accommodate their growth with the space that they have. So it takes longer before the space is absorbed. You can go to the next slide. And the canary in the mine that signals the strength of a market is also the sublease space. So if we look at these the 6 cities here, the percentage of space that is for sublet as a percentage of what's total available was quite alarming to look at in certain markets through 2020. But we see that now it has stabilized, which means that the tenants that were quick to put their excess space on the sublease market for lease doesn't mean that they stopped paying the rent. It's just that they were trying to get someone to take that sublease. That's wave is now more flat, and even in Toronto it's going down. In Vancouver it's going down as well. So there are different factors for that I can't go into too much detail here because of the time constraints, but it's a good sign. The other thing is that you can put your space available for lease or sublease, and what some and our professional tenant representation brokers tell us is that sometimes when there is a taker for that sublease, well, the main tenant might say, "Oh, well, I'm not sure if I want to let it go now." Again, for the last year and a half, there was a lot of wait and see. You could postpone your decision. You could list the space as available for lease. It didn't mean that you wouldn't take it back if it was still available later. So we'll see. Things were getting clear at the end of 2020 because those plans were shaping up, and January seemed like to be a return to office for sure scenario. And now that scenario is being postponed again. But there is these plans are just being postponed. These plans to return to the office. It will be a different return, but there will be a return. If we go to the next slide, I also, because we're talking about the downtown, one thing to keep in mind is that in Canada, a large portion of the office market is in the downtown area. So that creates the critical mass and the concentration to have a vibrant downtown once the office workers come back. And it's very high in Edmonton and Calgary, where you have all that this beautiful high-rise buildings, and the downtown is also the skyline of a city and its identity. So this is just wanted to put in this in context, and you can go to the next slide. So when we're looking at the available rate of the major downtown office markets, you know that we're talking about between 40 and 60% of the office stock. So Vancouver, again, the available rates at 10% is relatively low. Calgary continues to go up. Toronto and Ottawa stabilizing. Montreal continues to go up. But we don't want to do any forecast, but we see that the rise is slowing down. We can go to the next slide. In terms of sublease as a percentage of total available, then we see some markets where downtown markets where it's gone down a lot, which means there is as I said, it's the canary in the mine. When you see the sublet rates decreasing, it's usually a sign that leasing activity has resumed and there is more velocity on the leasing market. We can go to the next slide. I just have 4 minutes left, and I wanted to show you some of the, good news. There are some good news for downtown. The most beautiful, bold, interesting projects, they happen to often, most of the time, being downtown. If we just look at some of a few of the projects that were delivered in downtown Toronto during the pandemic, you see that when workers come back, they will be impressed with the beauty of their new of these additions to the downtown core. And if you look at also below each quarter in each project, the types of tenants that have leased in these buildings, you see that there's a commitment to office and a flight to quality as well. So it's important to there will be some repositioning of assets. It has to be, because every time newer and more performing buildings are delivered, then that means some buildings become have to be repositioned and maybe even converted. So we're about to enter an era of a lot of building conversions, buildings that no longer should be used the way they've been used in the past. But I thought it was encouraging to see that the recent deliveries, and also just to show investors confidence. There's another 8.5 million of space that will be delivered in the GTA by. So we can go to the next slide. I didn't have time to go through like through all the projects and all the CBDs, but also the ones that are about to be completed in the coming 2 years in Vancouver, I thought were interesting for this conference. I've selected the B6 project with a beautiful green roof, the post and the stack, because these projects, in terms of architecture, are really creating a beautiful landscape for the city. And I also wanted to bring to your attention the names of the developers. It's very small in the slide, but Oxford Properties, Quadreal, Bentall Greenoak, these are institutional investors, pension funds. They're committed to investing on the long term. So these are long-term developers, long-term investors, and to see that they are committed to the downtown core is good news for the CBDs. Bill has one tower that will also create add to the landscape. It's the Bank of the National Bank office tower. So it's very exciting to see these buildings. We see the drawings now, but when we go back to the office downtown, we'll be able to soon see experience it live. We can go to the next slide, and we have I have 1 minute left. I may take another 3. What's really key here is that working from home is not going away. It's working, and workers enjoy it. We did a survey, and it's showing that people feel that their environment enables them to work productively and so on. But on the other hand, we also have studies that say that workers are burnt out. They crave mingling with their colleagues, and so that's also the office can really help bring productivity back. There is a loss of productivity as well, and a lot of workers who feel overwhelmed. I have a few stats here which says that the Microsoft team meetings more than double, 2.5 globally, continues to climb. The average meeting is 10 minutes longer. The average Microsoft Teams user is sending 45% more chats per week, and the volume of emails have increased. So if we go to the next slide. So what Avison Young is currently doing is with the team, the X Factor project team is working with the occupants to see how to use the space, how to best use the space. There's no point in going to the office to do what you can do from home, and there are a lot of things that don't work from home. And so how to better use your space, your office space, to improve the productivity, because that's the raison d'etre of office spaces, to provide productive environments for the human beings that are doing the work, and even if they don't do all their work there. So if we go to the last, I think that's the last slide. So there's a way to reposition assets, to use less but better space, to maximize the use of space. The use of space has a social and environmental impact. We all know that. So the decisions that are being made now on how to best use the space do have a social and environmental impact, and this is what we are working with our clients to look at from all angles. So I think there's maybe a bit of time for questions.
That's great. Thanks, Marie-France. That was fabulous. I mean, you listen as is usual. The CUI chat audience has a whole life of its own and is over there solving world peace plus listening to you. And
I stopped reading it.
I know, they're fantastic. They're fantastic, this group. We really appreciate how much they do this. And but also they're all begging for more there, Marie-France. So I guess part of what the session that follows you is Environics, who are going to go into much more granular kind of detail on the street. So it'll be a good complement to what you've just done. But they're all saying, hey, what about our city? What about this? What about that? So I'm interested when you talk about, and I was appreciative that you said, look, there are still some new projects going forward. But you also started to talk about, do we need to imagine buildings being used differently? Could they, in fact, be adapting in different kinds of ways? So do you anticipate that? Do you think if work from home continues to be part of our routine, that we might be able to repurpose some of this office space?
Yes, there will be some office spaces that are too old to be used as office space, and that can be successfully repurposed. We say office, but let's take, for example, older malls that with large parking lots that are now being used to develop mixed-use projects. It's repurposing, and it's already happening. The buildings that are being built now by those leaders like Oxford and Quadrille and Bentel, we're way beyond the LEED buildings now. It's really the well and in creating an espace de vie, it's just a living.
Do you think, for instance, one of our hunches is that we need more residential space in downtowns, the central business districts that were only office buildings were in fact more vulnerable, and if you had more residential space. So do you see that at all in your index? Do you think that that's going to prompt some folks in the commercial real estate sector to say, okay, we're going to look at converting some of our parts of our buildings or something like that? To housing?
For housing, it depends on the investor. I can't speak for investors, what they, because they all have their own strategy. But having people living downtown makes for a vibrant, like night and day, the work, live, play, learn. That I know Michael Lemery speaks about is it's important to have this mix because the thing is with just office only use, then at night it's quiet and the restaurants can only open at lunch. And so no, it's good to have
mix.
Yes, a mix. And sometimes the mix are in satellite locations. You'll have a mixed project that is 2 subway stations away from the core. But it's important that in one place you limit having to go from one place to the other, and you can walk.
Walking is an important part of it. And accessibility, even if you're not able, if you need assisted devices, but that you can get to another location and that you have a bunch of different ways to get there.
Yes, and good public transit, obviously.
Well, you're leading perfectly into the sessions that follow you. So thank you, Marie-France, for joining us. There's going to be lots and lots of interest, I think, in ongoing how we can learn from the index and the kind of data that you're pulling. So I appreciate that we're going to continue to work with you and think about this and think about how the index could be shared with other cities and what are the other tools that are available. And Environics Analytics is following now to talk to us about their particular approach to the granular. So thanks for joining us. And just to we put into the chat, folks, the link to this index. You can have a look and be in touch with us at CUI if you want to continue to have a conversation, because I know I have Marie-France's cell phone number. So we're going to be in contact. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mary, for having me.